The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
And welcome to Triversity Talk. I'm Wendy Stewart, your hostess with the mostest. And my gosh, we're right before the eclipse. We're getting out of March. And you know what? I really need spring to come really soon, because spring is such a hopeful time when everything blooms. And it's certainly something we all need these days. The news has been extremely heavy, and sometimes it's hard for me to digest. And I think many of you know my husband, Alan Kaplan, passed away a week ago. And it's still hard for me to talk about. But he was very dedicated to Triversity and everything that we do. And he certainly supported me doing this show, which is why I'm very excited about the guests that I have tonight. First of all, a shout out to Cindy Stein, who has found me some terrific guests, as well as Simone Krause. You know, I'm always talking to people out there. If you know anyone you think would be great for this show, just have them get in touch with me. I am on Facebook, Wendy Stewart. They can private message me, or they can send an email, or they can try and reach me through Triversity, which is our center located in Milford, Pennsylvania. So our guest tonight dedicated a portion of his life to advocacy. And how did this happen? Because he spent 15 years in prison for not disclosing his HIV status to a partner. He joined the SERO Project Board of Directors while still in prison, while still incarcerated, and it enabled him to jumpstart his advocacy work. For those of you that don't know, the SERO Project works against the fact that someone can go to jail for not disclosing their HIV status. And that could be, a partner could just point a finger at someone and say, hey, they didn't tell me, and a person can end up in jail. So I love our guest tonight. I'm so happy he said yes. Please welcome Kerry Thomas, the SERO Project's Community Decriminalization Strategist. Thank you, Kerry, for being here.
Of course, Wendy. And first of all, my condolences from Cindy, from all SERO Project, about your loss. And I appreciate you, the resilience, and to keep pushing through. But definitely want to acknowledge your loss.
We both stood, we both stood for like what happened in the community. And yeah, that's, as you know, right? You push your way through. I mean, your story, when I heard it, really absolutely blew me away. How did you come to connect with the SERO Project?
Sure, that's great. So as you mentioned in your intro, I was sentenced to actually 30 years of incarceration under Idaho 39604, which is Idaho's criminalization statute for non-disclosure of my HIV positive status. And so I've been living with HIV since 1988, so pretty much all my adult life. And so my connection with SERO Project, after I was sentenced, and then you go through the system, I was placed in a general population at a private prison in Idaho at the time. Because not to mention I'm from Boise, Idaho, and so and shortly after I
brought you back home,
Exactly, no doubt. So as you mentioned, so I got a lot was going on, and you're trying to. Prison's a very heavy environment, and heavy might kind of be an understatement a little bit. And there's a lot of things that went into it for myself. And the Idaho system is the only system that I've been involved with, so I can't speak for other parts of the country.
So, Kerry,
that
when you
doesn't.
say you were put in with general population, could that
Yeah,
be
you
like
bet.
murderers, rapists, and the like?
All the above. I mean, general population
So,
is just the where a lot of times in the facility I went to, or where people were sent to who had a long, generally longer sentences. And so just when I was starting to navigate and not necessarily get comfortable, get kind of acclimated to the environment and the reality that I could be there for 30 years, I was contacted through a friend of a guy I'd never heard of before, Sean Strub.
oh yeah.
And so, yeah,
And
and
who
so he
you
was
were
coming.
also, I may add, besides being a
Exactly.
this, who I knew from the 80s from ACT UP. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, Sean's
Yeah.
been there a long time.
Right. And one thing about criminalization, this is true across the board, is that the media attention that or the negative media attention that comes with those cases is really heavy. It was a strain on my parents, my son at the time, who was around 12 or 13 years old, and
I
also
know.
even some at some levels, like in my case, again, I'm not speaking for the whole country. I can just
Okay.
speak to my experience. Even the accuser, in my case, there's a lot of pressure to the accuser, the friends and family, and the community. So that's one of the downsides of criminalization, because we don't get an opportunity to speak to the facts of the case. But that being said, so Sean, a friend through a friend, said, "Hey, this guy's coming across. Well, he's interested in doing a documentary on HIV criminalization." And to be honest, Wendy, I was kind of like, "Look, the media is not my friend. I don't know this guy."
Right.
And but then I understood that he was coming across the country, and he arranged to come into the facility. And so I agreed to meet with him, mainly because I was impressed with that he was so diligent, number one. And
Oh
number
yeah,
two,
no,
that he,
total clean
yeah,
act and a major. I mean, Sean is just a major in so many ways.
exactly.
Something
And
like this,
so
he would just take it like a pit bull and run with it.
and he did to the extreme. And so I clearly remember this, and I shared this with Sean, that because I have to have an escort down to the room where we were going to meet Sean, and he was just in there with him by himself, and I'm walking down there, and I told the officer or my escort, "Look, give me like about 20 minutes, half hour, and tell him and say you got to take me back."
Yeah,
I just wanted to be polite. Yeah, you bet. But 8 hours later, I knew that I wanted to do something as far as become an advocate. I didn't know what it was going to look like at the time, but I knew for sure after that 8 hour conversation that I wanted to do something. And so me and Sean, since then, I call him my mentor. He's really guided me through the process. And one thing I think I want to be clear to people is that when we have the conversation, it wasn't like, "Hey, Sean, help me get released from prison." That was never in our wildest as our hope, but wasn't something that we were leaning on. My participation, wanted to become an advocate, was simply because I didn't want other folks to have to go through what I'm going through, and anything I can add to that conversation as far as a personal experience, I was willing to contribute. So that's kind of how I became connected with
And
the
I'm
SERO
thinking
project.
you're the only person that probably did that, right? There weren't a lot of people that could be on the other side, incarcerated, that could advocate.
You bet. And I really want to be clear as well, is that I was very fortunate, and SERO was very fortunate that the Idaho Department of Corrections became a willing partner, and because we worked together for almost 12 years while I was 12 years of my sentence closely with SERO project, and the Idaho Department of Correction, from all the levels of leadership, whether it was the director or the deputy chief, the chief of the prison, and even the wardens, they were very strong advocates to the work that we were doing. So I definitely always want to give them a shout out.
Right. And I am very glad that you're saying that. The thing I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around, though, is, I live in New York City. Criminals walk here all the time. Were you given this long sentence because this is how they do things in Idaho?
I think it's not just Idaho, it's consistent throughout the country. All the states, and there's multiple states that still to this day have criminalization statutes on their books. And that's one of the driving forces that SERO project works on. And also that's where, as an advocate, that's when a strategist, that's what we're trying to do, is change those laws. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a conversation about whether or not the length of sentence is worth the level of risk that's involved.
Well,
And,
I can't actually, and if I mention this, and I know so many people in the gay community, if I mention this to most people, they're going to look at me and go, "Are you kidding?" First of all,
you bet.
For the reason I'm so happy you're on this show, I want this news out there. Second of all, it just seems the whole thing is absurd because anyone, my God, someone could point at me if I were HIV positive that I was involved with, and I break up with them, and they can turn around, right, and
Right. You
say,
bet. You bet.
and you know what I'm saying? Like, what leg can anybody stand on? There's nothing.
And that was part of my motivation. The more that I educated myself, because definitely going to that environment, I felt alone. I felt scared. I felt
Of course you did.
I don't want to say hopeless, but I felt the love. What am I going to do? And I kind of and phrase it now that I think that it's really mirrors when I first tested positive, because a lot of the same laws came out. And so I looked at it literally. I was given a shovel, if you will. And I can either dig deeper or I can dig out. And that was the choice I had. And I chose to dig out and start to educate myself. I started asking myself, what would society expect for me to do? What would they really want me to do in this situation? And I remember the judge at the sentencing, he said that I couldn't be trusted to live in society. And that really hit me hard. And so I wanted to understand that, and I wanted to make a difference for there. So I basically started asking myself, what would society expect from me? And one of those things, the list of things I have, they definitely want me to take full accountability. Whether or not I think that put the statute aside for a moment, but I had to take a responsibility for my own self.
Okay, but you took the responsibility. But here's where it's very confusing to me. I don't know the law. I'm not a lawyer, but you've got people appealing or taking plea bargains and getting off on murder cases.
You bet.
But yet they gave you 15 years. I mean, is there no prioritization, or does it have to do with how good your lawyer is? I'm assuming you had a lawyer.
I did. I had a public defender, and that's a challenge. And actually, and part of the story is I was actually sentenced to 30 years, and I was able to
originally,
right. And then through what's Idaho's called the commutation process, I was able to petition the parole board, the parole commission, to take another look at my sentence, and I'm thankful that they did, and they modified my sentence, and that's why I was released after 15 years. After
15 years to me is still a really long time.
It's a very long time.
You're not committing a crime. There's no crime, and you know, we're talking here, and we have, of course, listeners, people that follow this show. We're nationwide, but to me, everything you're talking about, this needs to be bigger and out there more. I mean, I don't know, billboards or whatever. Like, did you know that this can happen to you? The fact that this can happen, and it makes me think, I have to wonder, in prisons all over the country, are there other people like you, Kerry, just sitting in there?
I'm glad you bring that up, Wendy. You're bad. There's folks across the country that are from 1 year up to some gentleman in Washington State who's serving over 100 years. And so the wide range of the statute is astounding, and just and I always, anything that I do, my ability to release, it's not a me thing, it's not a Kerry thing, it's a we thing. You know, and that's the danger of criminalization, because if they criminalize one person, they criminalize every one of us is at that risk. And so if you roll the tape back a little bit, it's interesting, because the part of these laws were enacted because to get the Ryan White funding in the 80s, Congress put the stipulation on there, the states had to have a criminalization statute on their books. And what's interesting is that
connected to Ryan White. Yeah. My God.
Right, for the funding.
I didn't even realize. Of course, I remember Ryan White, but in order to get funding, they went and they put this.
Right, but here's what's interesting: as the federal government has removed that stipulation, the states haven't gone back and modernized their statutes, and that's the work that we do at SEROs, is starting to have that conversation with the states to have those that in the 80s is not the same as now. You know, that we're far more along, and it's interesting because I tested positive in 1988, right in the heat of the epidemic.
Yeah, that
and
was
some of the things. Yeah, and some of the fear and concerns and the angst and all the things that were going on back then, I can understand where the statutes came from. But what I'm asking folks to realize is that as my personal life, if I've changed, as I've evolved, so should the statute. And so let's modernize this. It's the states need to take a step back and say, yeah, we recognize in the 80s it was a different time. Not justifying whether or not the law, any kind of discrimination that goes in fact, but I can in my head, I can see how that would make how we get to that end. But the next page of that is, okay, now in 2000, that where we're at living out now, things have changed.
Yeah,
And
let's
so,
change it.
I advocate, or that I strongly believe that those statutes should be looked at a second time.
Harry, you would make a terrific lawyer. I think you should apply to law school. And really, because I'm getting so worked up and passionate about this, but you really have worked it out to, you even said you could understand how back then it could be something. I still can't, by the way, because I knew so many people that had HIV and AIDS in those days, but you're right. Fast forward to now, we need to get this stuff off the books. It just
right. And one main reason we have to get it off the books, because what we know today for sure is that with the medication that's available, the more people that are tested, the more people that can get on medication, and therefore we can end the whole bring this to a close. But what criminalization does is encourages, usually the only defense I would have if I didn't know what my status is. So I can't be charged if I didn't know what my HIV positive status was. So what they're saying is that if you don't know, that's okay. And so that discourages people from getting testing, where all the evidence says we got to get people tested. We got to get them on treatment, because treatment is prevention. Criminalization is not prevention. If our goal is to stop the pandemic and stop the spread, the more people know, not the less people know. And so I think that it boils down to this, that when it comes to treating any kind of illness, the proper venue is the medical society, not the criminal justice system. And that's where we're off. And I'm not necessarily knocking the criminal justice system. That's just not what they do. That's not their lane. Their lane is not medical science. The medical community, that's their lane.
Somebody away for what you were put away. You have that's a medical condition. Okay. Now it's controllable, right? But it's a condition. It's like diabetes or anything else.
Very much so. Very much so.
It is in its own lane. Somebody has someone has asthma, you're going to give them an inhaler. Someone has HIV, they need to take HIV medications,
Correct. You're 100% right. And the last thing we need to do is to discourage people from getting tested. Could you imagine if we, like you brought up diabetes, if there was an incentive that we put pressure on diabetics not to get treated, that would lead to further health complications.
Right.
HIV is the same way. We want people to know as soon as possible to get on treatment so they can help be part of prevention methods. Right. And I'd be remiss, and when you talk about the ramification of living and being incarcerated, one of the things I really advocate now that I'm out, first of all, if it happens to one person, it happened to all of us.
Thank you very much. That's exactly right.
Right. And there's so many people that are incarcerated now that it's a very challenging environment. If you look at other communities, if you look at the trans community, that's really putting people at risk in that environment to reveal their status and get the treatment that they need while they're incarcerated. I mean, the ripple effect of these type of statutes are far beyond simply the community. It affects inside the facilities as well.
Right. Well, you brought up the trans community. I mean, without a doubt, they are definitely being targeted right now. And
very much so.
Everything that you're saying about incarceration, and then you can apply it to the trans community and what would happen to people like that when they are put behind bars. It's really, this is such an inhumane action that's happening on many levels. And, I have yet to hear one politician, even on the Democratic side, really come out and put this as a platform and address this.
Well, the one thing that the platform for the President Biden's reelection and for his budget, he has set aside funds specifically for criminalization this time around. And so, of course, it's there. So we're very excited about that, and that's what's interesting across the board, across the country. The HIV community, we want to work with governments, we want to work with legislatures that'll help us to bring the truth to these statutes. We're not trying to get away with anything. We're just trying to live our lives. We're trying to. I often say that because I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways, and health-wise, that my health has maintained a great level of stability.
Yes,
and so
you are very fortunate.
But I would argue that my greatest side effect of being positive has been the criminal justice system, and I'm very adamant about that because it wears on not just myself, but the community, the broader community. That brings along a lot of stress. It brings a lot of complication in relationships. And we got to create an environment where folks feel comfortable and safe, a safe space for people to disclose their status.
Right.
Criminalization is the opposite of that.
No,
and so
it's
another, as the medications are improving and extending our life, but then they have these statutes that put that area in our life to live a normal, healthy life at
right.
jeopardy. That's
But
just
you know,
another
you
reason
said
why
it
this
in
is
the beginning,
scary.
it's two different lanes. Okay. It's the
Yes.
medical part of it, and then it's what they deem as illegal, and the two just don't go together. This is a whole separate thing, and it shouldn't exist. And while we're talking, it's making me think, the only way to stop it, people like you and people that are going to put bills forth to end this. But on the other side of the coin, we're having this discussion, and I have to think out there in what I call Billy Bob land. There's somebody that is just totally using this, right? This is the perfect weapon for them,
And that's interesting. I'm glad you bring that up, because in as your words, like in Billy Bob land, is, I think that when you look at it, we all want the same things. We want to spend time with our family and loved ones. We want to, if we have them, we want to raise our kids. We want to see our grandkids. Those are the things that are core values. But we get so polarized and pushed apart from that. And I think that and Cindy through SERO and all the folks there, they give me a hard time, because I say anything can be resolved over a cup of coffee and a donut. And what I mean by that, because I'm a little bit food motivated, I'll have to admit that.
I was going to say, when you really did. By the way, Cindy's on; she's watching.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, Cindy's on our comments. But I don't know, Cindy, can it be resolved over a cup of coffee and a donut?
That we can just start having the conversation like you're doing now. You do a great job of sitting down with folks and just having that one-on-one conversation. Because I truly believe, and maybe I'm just being an optimist, but I've yet to, this is inside the facility and outside the facility since the short time I've been out, is that I've yet to come across someone that, when we're just talking one-on-one about the realities of living with HIV, and then also with the realities of criminalization, that makes us take a step back. And that's what I think, and that's what I love about your show, as you encourage people to think. Not necessarily your agenda or your guest agenda, just to have an honest conversation. And I think I want to give you props for that.
All I want to do, I want to bring it down to the level of people and the folk. Like I live in New York, and I work with so many LGBTQ organizations. I know so many people involved. I'm telling you, I could talk to 100 people tonight that would be, you can go to jail for not disclosing that you're HIV positive.
You bet.
That's a problem. We all need to be aware that that's out there, and then people need to work on changing it. So when did you get out from jail? When did you get out?
Yeah, just barely. Thanks for asking that. That was a amazing day. So I got out a little over 6 months ago. It was September 11th.
My God, just recently putting
about
your
6 months
life
ago.
together.
And it's and I think what I want, and that doesn't have to, everyone's life's gonna look a little different. But my biggest hope, because I had so much support from the folks at SERO Project, from Cindy, from Sean, and I can't remember, it was probably like a year or so after I started was on their board. They flew across the country and had a visit in the facility, and it was the funniest thing, because we had to rotate the spot, like 2 people at a time, because there was like around 6 or 8 of us that came to visit. And so we had to constantly rotate. So every couple hours we'd have another. And that was, for me, that was going back to my housing unit. That was I was exhausted, but man, that was such encouragement to know that I'm supported. And because that's something that I felt early on in my diagnosis, that I didn't have that support.
Of course.
And so I'm just coming back. Last week was AIDS Watch in DC. And so for me, that was such a powerful experience, because that was the first time I was in a room of over 400 people that look like me, that talk like me, that had ambitions like me, that had families like me, that had disappointments, that had struggles in their life just like me. And the HIV was not living with HIV was not the issue. It was how we live our lives day to day. And for me, that's the message I want folks to understand, is that that's only living with HIV, like living with diabetes, only one smart part of our story. Our story is not our illness. Our life is our illness. The thing that our ambitions in life are our illness. And that's why I think when we have that conversation with folks, that's when change starts to happen. That's when we start talking to our legislature. That's when we start reaching out and connecting the dots.
But you know what? Every person has a right to pursue their dreams. Okay,
100%.
Because of an illness, right? HIV, it's unfortunate. You get it. I mean, it spread
Correct.
through New York like wildfire. I lost 3 telephone books of people. Remember those little phone books
Yeah, that's pretty
it's
powerful.
a
That's powerful.
horrible thing. And the other thing I remember, honestly, it was allowed to spread. That's where the silence equals death came from ACT UP.
Okay.
It was allowed to spread. But these were, there wasn't one person that was a freaking criminal. These are people living their lives, What did I grow up with? Every American is entitled to food, clothing, shelter, and an education, and a right to pursue their dreams. Since
100%.
when does an illness preclude that? How can you take somebody and incarcerate them over that? It is really, I know it's going on. It's just unfathomable to me. And they have to move quicker to get these statutes off the books. They have to.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because when folks talk about the 15 years, that's a long time. And one thing that I definitely was that I was grounded in, and I spent hours and hours of emails between Cindy Stein and myself, and phone calls. There were times where we would contact each other, weekly, if not daily. And one thing I really developed, and Cindy helped me to understand that, is the idea of patience. And sometimes people think patience is, and I'm only speaking for myself, that at one time I thought patience meant you had to wait. No, patience is about acceptance. And then keep moving. Patience about living in the moment and doing the things that I could do in that present moment to get to the next moment. Patience wasn't waiting to see if my sentence would change after 15 years. Patience was about doing the work day in and day out and being satisfied with what I accomplished that day.
But
I think
how did you do that? I mean, first of all of a sudden you go from being free in society to being incarcerated and in a lengthy sentence. What was your reactions? Let's say the first couple of years. Were you patient, or were you? I would be so angry. I would be explosive.
You bet. And the anger for me actually went away fairly quick. And I went quickly. I'm a big believer in the stages of grief. And so you definitely, and one of of grief and loss, one of our greatest losses is that we have in common in facilities is our loss of freedom, And so I was able to connect with the folks on that level. And when I started working with SERO, believe it or not, this is going to sound pretty, I think every prison show and every movie, they have somebody working in laundry. So I had the job in laundry. That's a true statement. And that was like a safe spot because it was just not very many people around. I could wash my own clothes. It was a place to kind of to gather my thoughts. Right. But when I got attached with SERO and I started working and getting a lot of information, I was like, damn, I have to, excuse my language. I was like, damn, I got to get out there and quit isolating. I can't have people like SERO out there doing the heavy lifting for me, and I'm going to hide in the laundry room. And so that's when I started getting out into the facility, and living my true life and defining what my true self was going to be. And through that, I was able to work with a lot of other men that we developed a peer mentor program that we can work with each other to help each other through this process of grief and loss and all things that come with that. And that's when I say that we had a very SERO with IDOC, the Idaho Department of Correction, was such a willing partner. And you said it, Cindy, personally. I mean, her and Sean, once they put their mind to something, it's going to happen. And they definitely took part of that part and really had a partnership with IDOC. And that's one of the things that the folks that are still incarcerated now, that's one of the things that SERO that we're really adamant about is to follow that model. To give people that are incarcerated under the statute the room to breathe and to figure out how they're going to navigate this, because it is a challenge.
And you came up with this model, this model of mentoring while in prison.
Yeah, it was myself and about 4 or 5 other men who had similar sentences, and we just and I don't speak for myself again, is that I just didn't want to live the normal prison way. I wanted to do something different. I wanted a life that could still be fulfilling, whether or not I had to serve 30 years or 30 months. I wanted to have purpose. And the men that I worked with had that same desire. And some of those relationships we still have today. I mean, it's amazing. And the mentor program has spread throughout not just the one facility where we started, throughout all the facilities in the state of Idaho. Again, you got to give credit.
Because of you, that's incredibly powerful. Yeah. I mean, what you're sharing here is you put your mind, you were in a really messed up situation and you could have gone down with it, with 15 years, right? And been bitter and angry
Sure.
and the worst, but instead you absolutely turned it around and made it into positive action while you're incarcerated. That's
You
really
remember well, yeah. You remember a while back? I think her name's Robin Roberts. She was
oh
on
yeah, of
ABC,
course, yeah.
and she had a cancer diagnosis. And I remember one morning and reading a couple of articles, and I got to always, at risk of plagiarism, I always got to give her the credit for this. But she had a little phrase that she said, "Make your mess your message," and I loved that, and that really resonated with me, because I think that the life, what you're saying, the out of control at that time was a huge mess. I could see that. I mean, it seemed like my family, I had concerns for my family, my son who was young, my wife, how is she going to deal with her husband that's now incarcerated in 30 years, the extended family, not to mention the family of my accuser. All that stuff's on the ball. That's messy. And that's one thing when I started connected with Cindy and Sean and the folks at SERO that I really wanted to highlight. Even now, since my release, I want to make that mess my message. I want folks to give folks that we can do things. And I think that it's not about my past and how difficult that was. It's about the goals that we have going forward and what we're going to do to have the statutes changed. And that takes everyone in the community, takes folks like yourself. Again, I can't give you enough appreciation for giving me and SERO this opportunity. And it takes all of us to have that conversation with your neighbor, to have that conversation with your congressman, and to have and the pressure on them to say that, just take another look. Let's everyone just take a deep breath, exhale, and let's take another look at these statutes. And that way we can move on now that
you're and I still have questions to ask you, of course, about your family relationships, but I'm just going to jump to something that's been on my mind. Now that you're out, are you getting I'm going to go very commercial on you, Kerry. You should have speaking engagements. Are there speaking engagements set up?
No, I think, and again, I'll keep referring back to SERO Project. We're taking things very slow. And and definitely, as long as it's a positive a show with a lot of reputation like yourself,
I love what SERO's doing.
It's a conversation worth having. You bet.
Right. I think going forward, this is, something that needs to be said. I mean, we're having New York City Pride. It's huge, New York City Pride.
That's what I understand. Right? That's what I understand.
And they book speakers for that. And I'm so glad we met on this show, because you can always recommend somebody. And you're like the perfect person because of the experience that you had, but also getting this word out. People need to realize that this has to change. It's completely unacceptable, because in your case, I mean, you took, what do they say? You make lemonade out of lemons, and you did that.
You bet.
Your mother and father, what was it like for them?
It was, and I'm really glad you bring that up. First of all, they were amazing people, and I think that they were until they passed away. They were married for 40 plus years, and just a very great examples for me. But it broke their heart. I mean, to see their son blasted on TV, with crazy accusations was hard. And so, and I did take a plea agreement, and part of that, people, I know if you watch, I'm not a big fan of certain TV shows that highlight police officers, because the impression is that only guilty people take a plea. Circumstances change that. And I wasn't going to put
absolutely will change that, right?
And I wasn't going to put my family through what would have been more grueling. I wasn't going to put my parents, my son, my wife, my coworker. I chose not to put them through that. In addition, I think it's important that our public defenders are not educated on HIV statutes, and so they were on a level to give a positive, a real strong defense. And so that happened in my case as well. The information was available. They didn't know that folks like SERO were out there they could reach out to for help, for education. And that's another area we need to improve when it comes to.
While we're talking, I'm thinking of that SERO, if they can go into law schools and talk. This is a topic that is just not being discussed enough, and that people are not aware of. And again, Kerry, depending on how the next election goes, things could get worse. It could be even worse, You
bet. And that's why I think that you've been brought up a couple of times, and it's so important that people be involved in the community. I would share with the guys, because obviously when you're incarcerated, you can't vote. But I would say, our community is right here. And what can we do in our own individual communities that can make a difference. And that's the message I have to people that feel that they can't do anything. You can. You know,
Right.
if we can reach out from behind facilities and change our lives, so we can impact people that are not incarcerated and change lives as well.
Right. So you're only out 6 months. What
Yeah.
what is this like for you? Like, what goes through your head? What do you wake up in the morning and think? What do you think when you
You
go to bed
bet.
at night?
Definitely gratitude for sure. And I think that I start the day with gratitude and I end the day with gratitude, because I think that any blessing that I have is truly not of my own doing necessarily. They are gifts. And
Right.
that's why when we're, as far as speaking out, it's not me speaking out, it's me speaking out for the whole community.
You are
And I
speaking.
can't say it enough. Yeah. I love that we want meaningful involvement, people living with HIV. What that means to me is that we're all in this together. You know that,
Yeah.
and I think that, and I'm a strong believer that those closest to our struggles, are closest to our challenges, are also closest to the solution. So we have to. So I think about all the time that part of my release from prison was coming to such a supportive environment that allowed me to. And my doctor at the clinic will probably love this, to admit that I probably in the 6 months could eat a little healthier. You know, I definitely been on food binge.
Right. Good
But
for you.
it's
Go for
but
the
it's been
donuts, coffee. Have 4
exactly
donuts. You earned it. Have
exactly.
a jelly donut. Carrie,
You
you
bet.
earned it.
And then I discovered the air fryer, which is an amazing tool. But to answer your question, it's about staying grounded. It's about
Yeah.
staying connected to the people that are supportive of me. And more than anything else, I've been allowed to have an environment where I feel comfortable to have those conversations, where
Exactly.
I can send a text message and say, "Hey, I'm scared today. I'm a little bit fearful that I'm being overwhelmed while I'm out, just released." And those are the same things that I didn't have when I first got my diagnosis.
Right.
And so a lot of times I can mirror what I'm going through now, what it was like, and I can kind of put myself in the shoes of people who are maybe newly diagnosed, who
Right.
people who don't have a lot of support. And through SERO, as a strategist, I want to provide that day to day. What does it look like when people swing their feet out of bed? What level of support that we can get, and that's another part that the SERO is really
So
at.
important. Well, speaking of support, you have a whole cheering team on here. Cindy Stein, HIV is not a crime. Shakina Rose, I'm sorry if I didn't say your name correctly. HIV is not a crime. That's right, Kerry. We can all do more. We can all speak up and speak out. And I am so right there with her. That's why we're doing this show.
You
Michelle
bet. You bet.
Troxel, thank you for sharing your story, Kerry. Your strength is so inspiring. Keep up your amazing work. HIV is not a crime. And of course, Cindy Stein, I'm so proud of you, Kerry. And there's somebody, I don't do very good with scrolling. That's not my forte, but somebody else wrote, I think his name's Ben.
You bet.
Everything's better with a cup of coffee and a donut. Yeah. But you know what? Really, at the end of the day, these conversations need to go in between people over a cup of coffee and a donut. And it's really important. And we really need to be looking at it. And not just in the LGBTQ community. I mean, HIV is not just limited to that community. All right. We really need to open up our eyes and think, how can we do better? Our prison system, and that's a whole other thing. And you know what?
You bet.
Bless the prison system in Idaho for getting on board with you. I'm right there with you. You know, kudos for them supporting you. But I also think, like, you're taking people that haven't done anything wrong and you're putting them in with hardened criminals. I mean, I wonder how many people end up becoming criminals from being in that system, or have something terrible done to them by somebody else. I mean, that's just awful.
And I'm glad, again, like that, you're bringing it, you're hitting all the key points. You're making this really
and these are the things that wake me up at 2:00 in the morning. Okay.
Yeah, you bet. And that's one of the things I'm so concerned about. And I'm gonna give the trans community example, because the way they are in the prison system, and if someone who happens to be HIV positive, then they could actually be charged even though they're a victim. Because if they fight back, you know, and defend themselves, and there's a perceived transmission of body fluid, especially blood, and the Idaho says they could actually still be charged. And so again, that discourages people to get tested at the most vulnerable part of their lives. That we're taking people and putting them at risk of not getting the help they need at a time they need it most. And
No,
then maybe
exactly.
that's just a conversation. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get involved in the mentor program, was to give people an opportunity to have the discussion. And then I'm not at liberty to share all the discussions that I had, but it
No,
was
no, of
able to
course.
it was able to have people have to sit down, or they walk on the ball field and have those challenging conversations about their lives and what they're going to do. And a lot of that was what came down to HIV, what the risks are for HIV, and because there's not a lot of education, and it's interesting. And I always find it fascinating for a statute that demands disclosure. It's a topic that we don't want to talk about. And
And
so, and to
you're
me,
absolutely spot on. Right.
right, it's from every level. We don't want to have the conversation. It's difficult to have the Congress take another look at the state level because they don't want to have a conversation. But
Right.
you're willing to send someone to a correctional facility for multiple years for not disclosing, but you won't allow people to come in the room and have the discussion on why this is a dangerous
Right.
statute.
It's a catch
That's something that
22.
needs to change. You
Right.
bet.
Right.
You
You're
bet.
100%. That really needs to change. So how old is your son now?
He's 29.
So your son is 29, and
Yeah.
you missed a huge part of his growing
Right.
up. But you know what? You're a grateful person, so you're getting it now, and it's a blessing. 29 is still young. What is his perception on all of this?
He's grown just like I have, and he's been able to weather the storm. And if it's possible, I want to give a shout out to my son Nigel, and also my daughter-in-law Ro,
Yes.
because I'll tell you what, they for Thanksgiving I had the opportunity to I was allowed to go visit them. They live in Texas, and they have 4 kids, so I have 4 grandkids.
Oh
And
my
so I was
God,
able
God
to.
bless
I
you.
was.
That
It
all
was. It
happened
was.
while you were incarcerated.
Exactly. And so I was able to visit with the grandkids. And I tell you what, I've always heard what folks say, they go to vacation and they need a vacation from the vacation, in a good way. Those kids just, wore me out, but
They
in
wore
in a
they wore
great
you
way.
out.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Yeah.
What a blessing. When
Yeah.
you
No
think about
doubt.
it, so much has got to do with your attitude. You're incarcerated for 15 years. Your son grew up. You have 4 grandkids. You're going to be grandpa no matter what. You've got
Right.
those 4
Sure.
grandkids. It
Sure.
really is amazing. I think of people that are incarcerated that come out and have nothing.
You
All
bet.
right.
And that's the majority. I think that, and that's the reason you talk about what I feel when I wake up in the morning and what
Yeah.
and at night. That's why that level of gratitude, because I realize this is the exception. And I like to propose that we expand what criminalization is,
Yes.
because it's not simply Kerry being incarcerated. As you just mentioned, the impact was also on my son, and
Right.
I think and my now daughter-in-law, because
Right.
they're probably 2 of the strongest people I know that were able to handle. She was with him through the worst of the worst when he was
God
15,
bless
16
her.
years old, because they
Right.
met in high school, and she has stuck it out because she cares about it with compassion. And
Right.
my hope is that everyone is in these kind of situations can find that level of support.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? But you know
Yes,
what? That won't happen for everybody. But if the
you
laws
bet.
be changed, okay, where innocent people are being incarcerated, if that can just get changed, that's a
You bet.
biggie. And somebody
You bet.
like you was
100%.
certainly instrumental. So have you had a chance to speak at any universities at all?
Not specifically on this issue yet. Like,
You
it
should
has
be
just been
traveling
6
all
months.
over the country. Law
Sure.
students would absolutely eat this conversation up. All right. You'd raise awareness. Certainly in universities, people are not thinking that if someone wants to point a finger at them, that they can go to
Mhm.
jail. They're not thinking
Right.
of that. Nobody's thinking of that. You brought it to light. It can happen to someone because it happened to you. And you
And
not
I think,
only yeah, you took it and you turned it around, Kerry, which is just really amazing to me. You're a special person because of your ability to do that.
and I appreciate that. And it's kind of, when you were talking, I almost had like a little flashback, and it
Yeah.
goes back to the very first conversation I had with Sean, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
And that's what that reminded me of. And again, it was never about me. It's not a me. I tell people it's not a me thing, it's a we thing.
It is.
And I think that I could have achieved any level of stability by myself.
Of
And so
course.
and to me, I think that's the message I want to give. We have a lot of work to do going forward. I think that we're more than willing to to carry the work going forward. There's so many organizations that are out there that are pulling together, and so that's progress. But I want everyone who is positive, when they swing their feet out of bed and they don't have enough money for rent, and they're not sure if they're going to have medication, they're not sure if they're going to have food for their kids, all those things, you know what, we're pulling for each other. And just like I can wait 15 years to get some kind of relief, I want people to know that level of patience. Again, it's not about waiting; it's about living in the moment. And I think that's the biggest message.
But you know what, Kerry, we all have to have each other's backs. And
100%.
And I honestly feel in this country, it's not about that at all. You're talking about, the me and the we. We're never thinking about the we. We don't say there before the grace of God go I. People. There's been such a disconnect, and then the pandemic did not help that at all.
You bet. You're right. It's scary times right now. It's scary
times. It's scary times.
Also
pivotal times where people like you or like me, we can get out there. We can share our platform. I've been able to cut doors that I was never able to get through before, because those doors, all you got to do now, you give them a little push and they'll open up.
Exactly. And that's a great analogy, to tell you the truth. And I think it's about it's about pulling people in. We focus so much on our differences. We want to tell people and pull people up. And to make change. Change isn't done by pulling people up. Change is made by pulling people in and inviting them into our space. And that's one of the lessons that I've learned over the past 15 years.
Thank you. Inviting them in, but also supporting them, because SERO came to you and supported you. And that is the best
100%.
example that I can think of that. I think we have a couple more. Shekinah Rose, even if there is no bodily fluid exchange.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You don't have any exchange of body fluids. Most of the statutes across the country are based on simply non-disclosure. And you're 100% right, is that we're left to prove that I did say something, that we did disclose. So the idea that we're innocent and proven guilty, no, a lot of times folks are put in situations you have to prove that they did disclose. And that's something, again, that's polar opposite of getting people tested.
To do that. I'm also thinking, I wanted to ask you this. If two people share needles, right? If someone has HIV and shares a needle with somebody else, does that fall and are there cases where someone said, oh, I got HIV from someone else's needle?
You bet. And that's something that's like, and again, I can primarily speak to the Idaho statute, and that is that they could be charged as well.
My gosh. Well, we're down to the last 2 minutes. I don't know where the time goes. I
know that's true. That's true.
What would you like to share with everybody out there?
Number one thing, thanks again for your time and the invite and all the overall work that you do. You truly are making a difference. But the biggest thing, again, is that HIV is not a crime. If we want to pull people in, we want to start having conversations and start moving forward. The days just as we have to, the medical science has changed and evolved to where we are to now. Our mental and our spiritual and the way that we view the people living with HIV has to change as well. So again, thank you for the time and reach out to SERO Project. We have tons of information. We have many partners that I can't list in the short time that we have that are willing to having a movement. It's not simply something that's static. It's a movement to start invoking change across the country. You bet.
Exactly right. And it's can you give me the website for SERO? Sure,
just www.seroproject.com.
Okay. www.seroproject.com. I've been on their site many times. Check them out. They're really doing incredible work and really making a difference. Kerry, I'm wishing you like all the best. All right.
I appreciate that.
And I was going to say keep doing what you're doing, but I don't need to say that. You're going to be doing what you're doing. This is what you're meant to be doing.
Right on. I appreciate that. Again, I appreciate your time, and I'll definitely reach out to you in the future. And maybe one of these times I'll see you in New York. Who knows?
Absolutely. If you're coming to New York for any reason, absolutely. Everyone do reach out to me. I'm a very accessible person. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course.
Cindy Stein, thank you so much for she's just an amazing human being. Sean Stroop, thank you.
No doubt.
Thank you, SERO Project. Kerry, All the best for you, really.
You as well.
Okay, thank you
as well.
so much. And
All right.
I always take a picture. Don't go yet.
Okay.
No, this is really hokey. I take it on the computer. It's like
I like it.
But yeah,
I do like it.
And I'll send it to you too. I said,
I'll definitely keep that for sure.
All right. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. We'll be back next
Everyone have
week.
a good night.
Oh my
Take
gosh.
care.
Happy Easter, happy Passover.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Whatever you celebrate. And just, remember, be kind to each other, have each other's backs. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Take care.